Well, two guys, tell me a little bit about your show. How long have you been doing your program about wine?
Well, we're very excited. Jim and I just filmed our one-year anniversary show last month, and we're coming up with our second New Year's show.
The annual holiday champagne special.
I see. And how did you decide, you know, what WHC needs is a show about wine?
Well, that's easy to answer.
Okay.
We always have a lot of parties in town, and actually I want to give credit to Mr. Steve Adler, town councilman, who's used to come to our parties quite frequently and said, guys, if you like having parties and talking about wine, why don't you go down to West Hartford Television and see if you can do a show about drinking and talking about wine.
Okay, yes, all right.
And the rest is vintology history, as they say.
Now, I mentioned a little bit about how wine is made. Wine has been around for a long time. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
As far as we can tell, yeah. There are archaeological records unearth stories about wine going thousands and thousands of years back.
Is it wine or beer that's actually older? Is it,
I don't know the answer to that.
Close call, but they both use the process of fermentation, yes?
Yes. And nobody knew what that fermentation process was. I think it was Louis Pasteur who actually proved that, that it was actually the bacteria in the yeast.
That is true. So, much like with yogurt, wine involves chewing down some bacteria. Bacteria. Sorry, yeah.
It always comes back to bacteria one way or another.
But fermentation is one of the older known chemical processes, probably not as old as fire, fine combustion. But it has been around for thousands of years, and it's used for wine, for beer, bread, obviously, yeast is used in as well. For centuries, it's been used in Asia for kimchi.
Oh, yes.
Glorified sauerkraut, basically, yes. Okay. And how does that process work with wine? If you're going to start out making some wine, where do you start with? Bacteria, yeast, grapes? How does it work?
Well, they crush the grapes, and some winemakers leave the skins in with the juice, and they'll do that for up to 24 hours.
So it's like with chicken, the skin is the best part?
It can be. You get a lot of tannins come out of the skin,
wine
and it gives a lot more flavor. And the tannin, actually winemakers are trying to get tannins out of the grape skin to affect the pH balance.
We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Yes. And the grapes is what makes for the different colors of wine, like wine comes in your white, your red, et cetera. So.
Well, again, this goes back to the skins. If you're crushing a red grape and you leave the skin in, you're going to get a red wine. You also crush a red grape and not leave the skin in, and you'll get a white wine.
And there's different varietals as to how they do it to make the colors different and so forth like that.
And do you use those delicious, like green grapes?
No, these are very different grapes. These are the grapes they use for wine are actually very bitter. So if you were to eat one, it'd be a very tart taste in your mouth. Yeah, it would not be pleasant.
Not so good. While grapes are the main one, is it also possible to make wine out of other types of fruits or plants?
Oh, you'll see all kinds of other wines. You'll see honey wine, honeysuckle, dandelions.
Different types of fruit.
That's right, dandelions, a common garden weed.
I don't think we've ever tasted one, the dandelion wine.
I have not tried one either. I've read about it on several occasions.
And actually, here in Connecticut, they do some really fruit infusion type wines.
Yeah.
With cranberries and I think
They'll do raspberries,
peach, raspberry.
You see a lot of ice wines where they do fruit infusions also. So they'll put a blueberry flavor in there, or again a peach.
Excellent. So wine is made right here in Connecticut then?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh yes,
yeah.
there's
we have
over
about 32 vineyards.
Is it that high now?
32.
32, yeah. And there's some quite interesting surprises and flavor out there, regardless depending on which vineyard you go to. There's it's fun. So support the economy and go
check out the Connecticut Wine Trail.
Makes a great date.
It does.
Kids also avoid dating. It's yucky. Just trust Mr. Science on that. So you mentioned, as did Mom, one of the keys to wine, yeast, the fungus among us. What role does the yeast play in making wine then?
Ooh, that's a close one. I'm not sure.
Well, the yeast is what starts the whole fermentation process. So when you start out, you've got grape juice, and the end product is the fermented beverage, which we call wine.
I think it has a bigger role in regards to beer, in regards to fermentation.
Yeah.
That is true. As yeast is, well, in some processes, can release a gas, usually carbon dioxide in fermentation. That's what makes the bubbles so that bread has a spongy feel rather than being the solid lump of dough, which I found out one time in the Breadmaster when I didn't put any yeast in it. Yeah, no, not good.
Not going to happen.
Not good.
And with champagne, you'll actually see there's a second fermentation. So they'll ferment the juice and then put it in the bottle and add some yeast and do a second fermentation. And they're trying to get that bubbling carbonation effect that you were talking about earlier.
Well, how long does it usually take then to make that kind of wine? Or in general, what are you talking about?
Well, if you're talking about a good wine,
Overnight?
years. I mean,
A good one, yeah.
You can get wine that's they do this every year. It's called Nouveau Beaujolais. They harvest the wine, they press it, they put it in a bottle, and they immediately serve it to the public. And it's this takes 6-7 weeks between picking, fermenting, and then serving to the public. But usually the good wines they're laid down for 2-3 years.
Yes. Well, we don't have 2 or 3 years, much less 6 or 7 weeks either. So let's do a slightly sped up version of what happens with yeast. When the fermentation process of yeast releases a gas, we're talking carbon dioxide. That would take too long to show you. So instead, I've decided to go with a different gas to be released by yeast, oxygen. Now, the chemical I'm going to put into the beaker here, this is hydrogen peroxide. I should say it's 3% hydrogen peroxide. H2O2. Kids, to put it in perspective, you know how H2O is water? 2 atoms of hydrogen, 1 of oxygen. Well, if you tack an extra oxygen atom on it for no reason, you get H2O2 or hydrogen peroxide there. Now, I'm using only the 3% because hydrogen peroxide reacts really fast and usually very violently with pretty much just everything there. So I'm using the watered down version. Now, let's dump in some of our friendly fungus, yeast. And then to speed up the process, we'll add a dash more bit of hydrogen peroxide there.
Should I move back?
Yeah, no, not yet. We'll save that for a later experiment.
I brought a towel if you need one.
There we go. And there, the gas we're releasing is oxygen. Hydrogen peroxide reacts really easily with lots of things because, well, it's not as stable as H2O. The second oxygen atom is really easy to break off, releasing oxygen and making that foamy world's worstest souffle like ever there.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to eat that, is what you're
Yeah,
saying.
no. You don't put that in your bread or nothing. No, just don't, people, okay? But a similar process can be used to make gas bubbles and other things, whether it's bread or beer, champagne, etc. Well, gentlemen, as I'm sure most of Mr. Science's viewers are unaware, or at least I was, is the difference between, shall we say, cheap, no good wine, and I won't mention any brands by name, Manischewitz, and good stuff, just how long the process is, or are there other factors?
There are a lot of
factors.
Yeah. The grape varietal you're working with, the region this comes from, temperature. There's also a lot that goes on during the winemaking process. Winemakers are allowed to add acid to the wine. In California, they're allowed to add tartric acid, but they're not allowed to add sugar. Other regions, you can add sugar. So what this means is you can taste the wine in its infancy and sort of determine what kind of end result you want and manipulate it by adding sugars and acids.
Is there any particular type of grape that seems to work better, or is that just a matter of personal taste, really?
It is about our personal taste, and that's what's the brilliance and the science of wine. There's so many different varietals and so many different variations that, as me and Jim have talked about, we could go through our whole life and not taste everything.
Yeah, there are that many varieties of grapes out there.
A lot of them out there,
Yeah.
yes.
We've thought about actually spending the rest of our life actually just doing that.
We're going to give it a shot.
Let's get to our career. We've got a limited time here. And there's differences in taste. What makes for the difference in things like some wines are very dry or some taste sweeter? What kinds of things is that? Is that because of the grapes, the acid, or what?
Again, that's going to start off with the grape varietal, but it goes back to the acidity level and the sugar level. And when we play with the pH meter later tonight, we can talk about acids in wine.
I tried to bring 2 distinctively different ones, one more sugary and one more a drier wine like the Sauvignon Blanc, so that might make a difference in the pH.
One way to find out. Tell you what, let's break out some distinct, no, these glasses are not for wine, people.
These are.
Yes. Well, I mean, I'd say about halfway through with the 2 different samples of wine, and I don't know, we'll see if there's any difference in pH that my handy-dandy chemicals can notice. All right, what do we have there?
The first wine is a Moscato, and that tends to be on the heavier sweet side.
Yeah.
It's like a Riesling. The best way to describe a wine like this is it's a little heavier. It's kind of a honey-based, or honey feeling in your mouth. So it's definitely going to be a little bit higher in the sugar. Tell me when to stop, Mr. Science.
All right, that's good. All right. Now, I'm going to add a chemical known as an indicator. Now, an indicator is a chemical that when it does some kind of chemical reaction, it changes colors. That makes it easy to, see if you've got your chemical reaction going or not. Now, there are different kinds of indicators. I know, probably not as many as there are types of wine, but there's a lot of them. Some of them change for only one specific chemical. Some of them change for a certain range of chemicals. And lots of them change for pH, something that measures whether something is an acid or a base. Now, acids are often found in foods. You mentioned wine is an acid, so I'll see that in a second. Other things that we eat, like vinegar, soda, milk is slightly acid. I hate to break this to you, rain is an acid.
Yeah. Tomatoes.
Base, what?
Tomatoes.
Tomatoes, absolutely. Bases are less commonly found in food, although baking soda is commonly known as a base. A lot of times bases are used to clean things, as baking soda is, but things like soap, bleach, ammonia, seriously, do not eat those. That would be even worse than the yeast thing. But those are bases or alkalines. Now, I happen to have an indicator here called universal indicator because this will change colors for both acids and bases. All right, let's give a shot here. And by the way, we haven't tested this experiment ahead of time. Who knows
Yes,
what's,
we have not. So
who knows what's
if
going to
I
happen?
have a
Not
nervous look
me.
on my face. Ooh,
Ah,
look at that.
we're getting a nice red color here. We'll add just a little more.
Almost like a rosé
I
color.
was just going to say.
Yes. No, seriously, don't drink universal indicator either. No, it's not good. Interesting. Well, that deep red color tells us this is clearly an acid and fairly acidic. Universal indicator will turn the hot colors, your red, your orange, your yellow for acids, where for bases it goes to blue, maybe even purple for really strong bases. And if it's neutral, neither an acid or a base, then it's sort of a deep green.
So a heavier acid-based wine, for instance, that we're going to try next, if it's darker, that means it's more acidic.
One way to find out. Pour it out. What do we have for wine number 2 here?
Wine number 2 is a Sauvignon Blanc, which people who've seen our show know that we tend to be fans of. It's a little on the drier side, a little bit more alcohol in the Sauvignon Blanc, very citrusy, so that actually might in itself be a characteristic
Yes,
of
that is true. Citrus fruits like lemons, oranges, grapefruits do tend to be highly acidic right off the bat on their own.
And wines actually have 3 different acids in them. One of them being citric.
Citric acid, okay.
One of them being tartric acid.
Tartric acid.
And the third is the tannins that we talked about earlier.
I'm guessing that would be tannic acid.
Yes.
That's why they pay me the big bucks. They don't really know. All right, let's see if we can get any noticeable difference here. And again, if they're both acidy enough, perhaps my universal indicator will be too blunt an instrument, but let's give it a shot here.
Oh,
We're
looks a
getting
little
pretty
clearer.
similar. Let's give it a second toast just to be sure there.
Huh.
Well, for the fans at home, most wines on the pH level come in between 3.3 and 3.9. So I don't know if that's too tight of a range for us to get any kind of difference.
Once we get below a certain level, our universal indicator goes to red, and that's as far as it's
Okay.
going there. I'd say similar. Should we try one more base? I have one idea
Sure.
here. We'll mix up. And by the way, don't mix together 2 wines, right?
No.
Probably
We do not recommend
Probably
that.
results in
Generally,
something.
yeah.
No one wants to eat there. Anyway, give me a little bit more of the dry wine there. Let's test that out with a second indicator. This one, well, we know these aren't bases, so we don't have to worry, but this one only changes color for acids. All right, let's see what kind of color change we get here.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, that is quite acid there to get
Wow.
from Crescal green to the nice yellow color.
That's amazing.
Yes. You know, the different kinds of indicators can give us different changes in color. This one has a slightly lower pH scale on it than the universal does, which pretty much goes from acid to base to almost the whole pH range.
I got to say, Mr. Science, we've drank a lot of wine, and I've never actually used wine without actually drinking the wine to have such a drastic, I mean, generally when we're drinking wine, we get the feeling right away, whether we like it or not.
Right.
Seeing wine in this light is rather interesting. I must say, it really is, to see the characteristics of chemicals and such like that.
Oh, yeah.
Bob and I never really paid attention to the acid levels of wine until last month. We were doing a special for Thanksgiving and discovered that higher acid wines are actually better wines for Thanksgiving. That's a better pair.
Why for Thanksgiving?
Because you eat a lot of creamy foods, a lot of buttery foods, those heavy cream
buttery
sauces, and foods that are high in fat, like the turkey, the dark meat of the turkey. So
I prefer light meat.
Everybody's got a favorite.
Yeah, okay.
But that's the problem with Thanksgiving is there's so many different tastes on the table. If you're trying to pick one wine to go with everything, what are you going to go to? And unanimously, people were saying go with a Riesling because those tend to be higher in their acid level than other wines.
And so, does that boil down to like the matter of taste or what the acid does instead?
Everything's always a matter of taste.
It's a matter of taste, and
Okay,
it's all what's
gotcha.
going on in your mouth.
And I
It's-
know we have a bubble experiment we're going to get to, and usually champagne or sparkling goes good with pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can never go wrong with that for taste in regards to what people might pair with a Thanksgiving meal.
Now, as I recall from citrus fruit, certainly, acids tend to have a tangy sort of taste to them there. So does that translate to wine as well? The more
Absolutely.
acid, the more
Yeah.
tang,
If
for
you
lack
have
of a better word?
Yeah, if you get a wine that's very high in acid, it's going to have kind of a tart, sour taste to it. And if you have
Like lemon juice.
Yeah. And if you have something that has very low acid, it's going to taste flabby and weak, kind of flat. So most winemakers are trying to get somewhere in the middle there.
All right. Well, we've got a few minutes left. Now let's try one more experiment. Now, kids at home, you may be familiar with a certain experiment involving Mr. Science's favorite drink, sorry, not mine, Diet Coke, and Mentos candy. You see, sodas have a gas in them, carbon dioxide, that's what makes the bubbles. And by dropping in Mentos candy, now, that gives a place for all the carbon dioxide to bunch up, form the bubbles quicker, and, well, it makes a tremendous mess. Also, don't try that in the living room. Like, really? Okay. Well, Diet Coke is a good beverage to do that with because it's cheap and, being diet, less sticky and all that. But it will work with other things, such as, say, champagne. Could you do me a favor, Bob?
I would
and uncork
gladly
there?
unpop that for you.
Now, one reason that champagne not used as often, aside from being pricier than your average Diet Coke, and believe me, on my show we spared every expense with this stuff, the neck of the bottle is also a little narrower, so I had to break my Mentos up into some pieces here. And added a little extra sugar just because. And tell you what, all right. Now, normally I would say
Back up.
it would be bad form to, douse your guests in
I think you better give me a
champagne
shot of
and
that
stuff
too, Jim.
there. But they signed the release waiver before coming on the show. All right, let's add some sugar and Mentos here.
Look at that.
Excellent. Oh, and all into the bucket, too. I will never be that neat again. I promise you that, viewers.
That's like the
Excellent.
French do when they cut the top off.
Yes,
With the,
and they saber it.
Exactly. Once again, providing nucleation sites, fancy word for a place for the bubbles to bunch up. They start to fill in more regularly. And
How many Mentos was that, Mr.
how
Science?
many Mentos? That was chopped up, I believe, 5 of them, and I added a little extra sugar because I may have destroyed some of them while chopping them up.
We're going to use that at one of our parties as a little
Oh,
centerpiece.
that's excellent.
I
Yes.
like that. A cheap bottle.
Cheap bottle,
Cheap
yeah.
bottle,
Cheap
but
bottle,
it
yeah.
still is a great
Yes.
special effect.
As I said, the slightly narrower mouth than on soda makes it harder to get them in there quickly and all, but as I said, it works with Mentos. It will also work with powdery things like sugar or salt, too. Again, really don't drink that afterwards.
And you actually did the 2-liter bottle soda experiment
2-liter
here?
bottle of soda, yeah.
Did that go up?
Yeah,
pretty
we
good?
did make a little bit of mess high up in the studio. Yeah. All right, gentlemen, we're almost out of time. Just to let viewers know, your show, Two Guys and a Lot of Wine, on WHC-TV, cable access in West Hartford.
Absolutely.
We're also on YouTube,
Uh-huh.
and you can friend us on Facebook.
Excellent. Well, Two Guys, thanks very much for being on our show. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Jim.
Mr. Science.
Thank
It
you,
has been a
Bob.
pleasure, and I really got to say, I was really
Excellent.
excited to be on your show and see these experiments.
Oh,
So.
thank you. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. We'll see you again next month on another exciting and less wet episode of Surely You're Joking, Mr. Science.